On June 20th, 2024, Kiefer Sutherland shared some truly sad news on social media. He announced the passing of his father, Donald Sutherland, who he rightfully called one of the most important actors in the history of film. His career racked up nearly 200 screen credits over 6 decades, including some iconic roles. Besides his professional achievements, his kindness and political activism earned him plenty of admiration as a person. He had a long, brilliant, and fascinating life, but it was not without its moments of true drama and danger. Welcome to Hollywood Mysteries. Donald McNichol Sutherland was born on July 17, 1935, in New Brunswick, Canada. He was the son of a salesman who also went on to run the local bus company. His childhood was tough at times. He suffered through bouts of serious illness, including hepatitis, polio, and rheumatic fever. Then there were the family moves, first from St. John to the town of Hampton, where his father took a job running the local power company. Then the family moved again to a town in Nova Scotia, where he spent most of his teenage years. During this time, he developed an interest in media and the arts, landing his first job as a radio correspondent at just 14. Encouraged by his father, Sutherland studied engineering and drama at Victoria University. He spent 4 months in Finland on an exchange where he spent time learning about mining, and he also married his first wife, Lois May Hardwick, around this time. By 1957, he chose to pursue acting full-time. He left behind a potential engineering career to join the Ontario theater scene. Sutherland was often called unattractive, even by those close to him, including his own mother. He was often seen slumping to avoid towering over others due to his height of 6'4". And so Sutherland didn't see himself as having leading man potential. He would have to rely on hard work and talent rather than classic matinee looks to make it to the big time. Nevertheless, he crossed the Atlantic to study at the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art, where he started his career as a character actor. In the early 60s, Sutherland appeared in many West End productions and British television shows. Sometimes these roles overlap, such as when he played Fortinbras in a televised production of Hamlet. Sutherland's first film credit was in the gothic horror film The Castle of the Living Dead, directed by Warren Kiefer and Luciano Ricci, and starring the legendary Christopher Lee. In this film, he showed his versatility by playing 3 different supporting roles. He portrayed both an old man and a young sergeant, whose terrified expressions conclude the film in a fairly corny, but effectively horrifying way. On top of those, he took on the role of a witch. This led to a funny scene where he converses with himself as both the hag and the military man. He then appeared in several other horror films, including Dr. Terror's House of Horrors and the 1965 Hammer classic, Die, Die, My Darling, alongside Tallulah Bankhead. But this venture into horror seemed more out of necessity than genuine interest in playing genre roles. Sutherland knew he was capable of more intelligent and complex parts. Still, it seems like he was grateful to Kiefer for the opportunity. A couple of years later, in 1966, Sutherland married actress Shirley Douglas, and they gave birth to a son that same year who was named Kiefer. Kiefer, as most of you will be well aware, went on to have his own exceptional career as an actor. Looking back on his early film audition failures, Sutherland recalled often being told they wanted a guy next door look, and he didn't fit that mold. His mother told him he had a face full of character, and this rather backhanded compliment seemed to stick with him. He said the remark put him in a state of depression for a full year. These criticisms aside, his piercing blue eyes made him perfect for close-ups, whether showing threat, wonder, tears, anger, or desire. Reading through articles and interviews, it's clear that Sutherland's insecurities about his appearance often affected his career. For many, he was always striking. His face was extremely expressive, and in later years, his gangly form would turn him into an unlikely sex symbol and unique male lead in Hollywood. But before that could happen, he was still making his way. He landed a role in The Bedford Incident, a big-budget Cold War drama alongside Richard Widmark and Sidney Poitier, and then appeared in the TV shows Gideon's Way and The Saint. While working on The Saint, he asked Roger Moore, the show's star and occasional director, if he could show a rough cut of an episode to some Hollywood producers who were in town looking for talent for a war film. More obliged than he was cast in the film, which turned out to be The Dirty Dozen, alongside Charles Bronson and Lee Marvin. The British-shot MGM film was a huge hit, and after this he left London for Hollywood. Sutherland was also courageous and willing to pitch in where others were not. In The Dirty Dozen, for instance, he was originally set for a minor role as Vernon Pinkley. The character wasn't supposed to have much screen time until another actor refused a scene. Director Robert Aldrich then said, "You with the big ears, you do it," and Sutherland took the chance. The success of this cult film led Sutherland to realize he could make it in Hollywood. With financial help from his friend Christopher Plummer, he moved his family to the US and quickly started working on various projects. He had proven himself as a great comic relief in The Dirty Dozen, which was otherwise a gritty war movie. So this led him to be cast in MASH, even before Robert Altman and Elliot Gould joined. Though Altman reportedly tried to fire him during filming, a claim Altman later denied. Producer Ingo Preminger was right in casting him. As Hawkeye Pierce, Sutherland excelled in balancing satire and seriousness, contributing to the film's unique mix of chaos and order, irreverence, and critiques of war. After this, Sutherland's Hollywood career followed two main paths. On one side, he was a favorite for edgy comedies breaking away from old Hollywood traditions. He starred with Gene Wilder in Start the Revolution Without Me, and led in Paul Mazursky's Alice in Wonderland. He also had a memorable scene in Little Murders, playing an eccentric reverend with a monologue on existentialism and rejecting the divine. On the other side, he repeatedly appeared in war films like Kelly's Heroes and Johnny Got His Gun, where often he came to represent a kind of everyman. The absurdity of the lanky, sensitive, and intelligent male being thrown into the meat grinder with everyone else. He always seemed like a guy who wanted nothing to do with wars, and in reality, this was how he felt. In fact, Johnny Got His Gun aligned well with Sutherland's political beliefs. The film sent out a strong anti-war message through its disturbing narrative. Later, he joined the Vietnam Veterans Against the War and created the traveling show FTA, Free the Army, or as it was more crudely known, Fuck the Army. During these performances, Sutherland would often recite lines from Trumbo's film. However, it was his role in Alan J. Pakula's Clute that truly sparked his anti-war activism. He gave a strong performance alongside Jane Fonda, who was also at her best in this thrilling and unusual neo-noir film. The stars fell in love and began an affair, Sutherland having divorced his wife 4 years earlier. At this time, Fonda had positioned herself as one of the leading anti-Vietnam War activists in the country, and her energy and enthusiasm for the cause seemed to resonate powerfully with Sutherland, who allied with her as a public figure opposing the war. This affair lasted a few years, with both stars intensifying each other's political ideas. Their joint activism is shown in the FTA documentary produced by Sutherland. In this documentary, we can see how once upon a time Hollywood stars risked their careers for their political beliefs. Their campaign even led to them being placed on the official CIA National Security Watch List and kept under tight surveillance, a fact which was revealed in 2017 through declassified documents. As for Kelly's Heroes, this war comedy turned out to be fatal for Sutherland, albeit only temporarily. During filming in 1969, he contracted yet another serious illness. He remembered it like this in a later interview. "I got sick in the middle of shooting Kelly's Heroes. I came to Yugoslavia for a day's filming, and I was out for 6 weeks. They took me to hospital. I had spinal meningitis. They didn't have the antibiotics, so I went into a coma, and they tell me that for a few seconds, I died." The medical crisis caused major upset on the set as the cast and crew went into shock about the sudden deterioration in his health. But he pulled back from the brink, and later on would reveal exactly what he saw during his brief medical death, which we'll come back to at the end of the video. Fortunately for Sutherland and all of his fans, he managed to make a full recovery. 20 years after this event, by which time he was a wealthy man, he devoted a large amount of his time and fortune to the Montreal Children's Hospital in Canada. He had first-hand experience of the horrors of childhood illness, and thanks in no small part to his efforts and role as honorary fundraising chairman, the hospital has saved countless young lives. In 1972, his affair with Fonda wound down, and he fell in love with his Alien Thunder co-star, Francine Racette. They were married that year and ended up having 3 sons together, all of whom, like Kiefer, were named in honor of important directors and movie industry figures from Sutherland's life. Rogue was named after Nicolas Rogue, while Rossif, also an established actor, was named for French director Frédéric Rossif. Finally, Angus Roberts' middle name is a tribute to Robert Redford. His recent designation as a dangerous political figure notwithstanding, Sutherland then won a major role in 1976's The Eagle Has Landed. This was in part because he was seen as less dangerous than Richard Harris, who apparently lost the part due to his connection to an IRA fundraiser. Before this British war film began, Sutherland revisited the horror genre, but this time in one of the most intelligent and psychological horror films ever made. Rogue's Don't Look Now became a 70s classic, filled with vivid red imagery and scenes of overpowering grief and suffering. Sutherland's role was one of his first portrayals of fatherhood, though portrayed through a surreal lens. He also featured in one of cinema's most famous sex scenes with Julie Christie, so realistic that it had been long rumored that it wasn't acted, although Sutherland always denied this. And who could forget that reveal at the end, one of the most unsettling moments in Hollywood history? A few years later, Sutherland starred in another horror classic, a remake of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. If Don't Look Now resonates with themes of loss, this film is better known for Sutherland's chilling, inhuman cry in its final scene. That scream seemed to open up a new set of American fears and insecurities, as the optimism of the 1960s had truly evaporated by now. Sutherland was a true master of horror. His talent isn't limited to traditional horror roles. He can explore the darkest parts of the human soul in any project. Take his role as the original Homer Simpson in The Day of the Locust. This film depicts old Hollywood's hedonism turning into a chaotic, self-destructive nightmare, and is a definite all-time favorite here at Hollywood Mysteries. Sutherland dives into John Schlesinger's wild vision with complete abandon and makes the film into a pure fever dream at its climax. If Babylon felt bloated to you, then this is its lean and terrifying inspiration. He also clicked well with Schlesinger, but he was about to be picked up by one of the true masters of cinema. Sutherland once said, "When you're working for a good director, you become subjective and submissive. You become his concubine. All that you're seeking is his pleasure." This intense dedication is what Federico Fellini saw in him when he described Sutherland, a little cheekily, as having the eyes of a masturbator. This peculiar quality landed him the lead in Fellini's Casanova, a visually stunning film that required absolute commitment, as well as a somewhat masturbatory temperament given the legacy of the film's subject. Sutherland's portrayal of the serial seducer is both otherworldly and deeply human. Fellini makes the sexual side of Casanova feel unsettlingly familiar, and it can be seen as a kind of horror film in that regard. Sutherland's willingness to take risks set him apart from other new Hollywood stars. While others like Robert De Niro also took on challenging roles, Sutherland's choices often pushed boundaries much further. In Bernardo Bertolucci's gargantuan 317-minute-long 1900, De Niro plays an important role, but Sutherland's portrayal of a fascist psychopath is far more complex and disturbing. Even Sutherland found it difficult to watch himself in the film, telling people he was scared by his own performance. These Italian films are just a couple of examples of Sutherland's departure from mainstream Hollywood at the peak of his fame. He wanted to challenge himself in Europe, but this did lead to a decline in American popularity. Financial troubles followed, not because he always chose artistic integrity over commercial success, but sometimes due to poor foresight when it came to finances. Consider his work with John Landis, especially the role of the Bohemian Professor in 1978's Animal House. Not realizing the potential success of this film, Sutherland chose a modest salary over a share of the film's future profits. Looking back, he thought this decision might have cost him up to $14 million. This might explain why, as the 80s turned into the 90s, he started balancing more TV work with his movie roles. He was able to make himself financially secure through his TV work. However, it's not fair to say this period was one of artistic compromise. In fact, the decade began with one of his finest performances, playing a grieving father in Robert Redford's Best Picture-winning Ordinary People, where he was truly outstanding. Many actors would have settled into prestige roles, but not Sutherland. He continued to pursue unusual and diverse projects, including a return to horror and genre films. In 1985, he was back with Nicolas Rogue and met Kate Bush. Their chemistry was evident in the cloud-busting music video they made, and the song was a big hit. By 1989, he was re-engaging with politically charged cinema. In Uzan Palsi's A Dry White Season, Sutherland played a man who evolves from an apologist to a dissenter against apartheid. His character's journey is complex, far from the typical white savior narrative. It's a challenging role that is one of his best performances. Sutherland was known for his ability to elevate his co-stars and take every project seriously, whether it was an art house film or a more mainstream piece. Even his supporting role in Buffy the Vampire Slayer was so good that some thought it was Oscar-worthy. As the 20th century came to a close, Sutherland became known for his memorable cameos. His role as X in Oliver Stone's JFK is a prime example, where he delivered one of the most engaging information dumps in movie history. His role brought viewers into the conspiracy, and never for a moment does the attention wane, in spite of the heavy amount of exposition he was charged with. He brought a similar intensity to Backdraft, with his portrayal of a pyromaniac, and he added depth to smaller roles in The Italian Job and Cold Mountain. Even in the smallest parts, Sutherland could create something special. As time went on, Sutherland's supporting roles dominated his filmography, making his leading performances rare by comparison. Despite his obvious talent, Sutherland was never nominated for a competitive Oscar, not even for iconic roles in MASH or Ordinary People, which would have defined other actors' careers, but were just part of his extensive list of achievements. In the late 90s, he came close with A Time to Kill and Without Limits, but the industry's ultimate validation eluded him. Fortunately, the Television Academy recognized his work with an Emmy. He is often cited as among the finest actors never to be nominated for an Oscar. One of his best, yet lesser discussed roles is in the TV movie Citizen X, for which he won the Emmy. He played a high-ranking Soviet official, balancing the investigators of a serial killer case with the higher-up. Sutherland never became complacent as an actor. He brought unique touches to each character, whether through wit, venom, unexpected humor, or a steely edge. His portrayal of Clark Clifford in HBO's Path to War and the manipulative Nathan Templeton in Commander-in-Chief are notable examples. Whenever he showed a softer side, he made it unforgettable. His portrayal of Mr. Bennet in Pride and Prejudice is yet another that stands out. Sutherland brings a certain laconic, self-amused quality to the role, the type of character he truly mastered. His final scene with Keira Knightley in this film alone deserves to be in the Hall of Fame for cinematic fatherhood, and any tribute to him would be incomplete without it. Perhaps the Academy recognized this oversight, as Sutherland received an honorary award in 2017. This was likely influenced by his resurgence in popular culture, due to his role as President Cornelius Snow in the Hunger Games series. Sutherland actively pursued this part, even writing to the filmmakers to impress them with his passion for the project. He was motivated by a desire to politically engage younger audiences. He wanted to, quote, wake up an electorate that had been dormant since the 70s. Hopefully, those younger viewers who discovered Sutherland through these films explored the rest of his impressive body of work. Donald Sutherland continued working until the very end and is survived by his partner since 1972, Francine Racette, as well as his 5 children, Kiefer, Rossif, Angus, Rogue, and Rachel Sutherland, and grandchildren. He passed away in Miami, surrounded by family and admired by many more. Now, going back to his earlier brush with death in 1969, Sutherland had a very clear memory of the experience. He described it as, watching your body go down this blue tunnel. It's iridescent, like an oyster shell. It's very seductive, dying. I didn't want to go, but it was incredibly tempting. You just go, ah shit man, why not? He came back from the brink then, but not this time. I hope he was at peace as he returned to that blue passage. More than that, I hope he knew how much he was loved, how many lives he touched, and how he will never be forgotten. That's all for this episode of Hollywood Mysteries. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and check out our members' content both here and on Patreon, as well as our store page. All links are down in the description. Sweet dreams.